The day America realized it needed a new navy. On the morning of December 7th, 1941, as smoke drifted over Pearl Harbor and battleships lay shattered in the water, Japan believed it had secured a decisive victory. Admiral Yamamoto's plan was simple: cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet, destroy American morale, and buy enough time for Japan to seize an empire before America could react. But Japan miscalculated something fundamental. They believed they were fighting the American Navy of 1941. They had no idea that within just 3 years, they would be facing an entirely new navy, larger, faster, more advanced, and built at a speed that defied every expectation. The truth is this: Japan won the first round of the Pacific War, but America won every round after, not because of luck, technology, or even strategy, but because of factories. Pearl Harbor did not cripple the United States. It awakened an industrial giant whose greatest weapon was not a single ship or aircraft, but its unmatched ability to produce them. Between 1942 and 1945, the United States built ships at a rate no one thought possible. Carriers that normally took years were completed in months. Escort carriers rolled out like automobiles. Shipyards operated 24 hours a day. Entire industrial cities were created from nothing. And by 1945, the U.S. Navy was so massive that Japan could not destroy ships faster than America could build them. This is the story of how the United States created the largest navy in human history, a force so overwhelming that it reshaped naval warfare forever. And it all began with a simple realization: the age of the battleship was over. The age of the aircraft carrier had arrived. The shift after Pearl Harbor: carriers become the center of war. Before Pearl Harbor, many navies around the world still believed in the supremacy of battleships. For decades, naval power was defined by armor thickness, gun size, broadside weight, turret layout, maximum speed. Aircraft carriers were seen as support ships. Reconnaissance platforms, bomber delivery systems, secondary assets behind the battle line. Even the U.S. Navy, despite its forward-thinking officers, still measured strength primarily in battleships. Pearl Harbor changed everything. The battleships that symbolized naval power were now burning wrecks. But 3 American aircraft carriers were at sea on December 7th. USS Enterprise CV-6, USS Lexington CV-2, USS Saratoga CV-3. These 3 ships would become the backbone of the early war. And more importantly, they proved that the future belonged to carriers. Admiral Nimitz understood this immediately. Instead of rebuilding a battleship navy, he demanded a new strategy. We will build a carrier navy faster than Japan can sink our ships. The industrial map of America, the nation that could outbuild anyone. Japan possessed skilled shipwrights and a long tradition of naval engineering. But it lacked one thing: industrial scale. Japan had limited steel production, limited oil, limited industrial workers, limited shipyards, limited machine tools, limited merchant shipping capacity. Japan could not replace its losses. The U.S. could, and would, on a level the world had never seen. By 1942, American factories outproduced Germany, Japan, and Italy combined. But what truly shocked the world was how America mobilized its shipbuilding industry. The shipbuilding revolution begins. America builds new navy yards from nothing. Pearl Harbor forced the United States to accelerate plans already in motion. The Naval Expansion Act of 1940 had authorized massive fleet growth. But after December 7th, the goal changed from expansion to replace the Pacific Fleet as fast as possible. The U.S. built or expanded shipyards in Newport News, Virginia, Brooklyn Navy Yard, Mare Island, California, Hunters Point, California, Puget Sound, Washington, Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, Norfolk Naval Shipyard, Bath Iron Works, Maine, North Carolina and South Carolina yards. The massive Kaiser shipyards on the West Coast. Many of these were enormous facilities, industrial cities in themselves. The Kaiser shipyards in particular became legendary. Before the war, Henry Kaiser had never built a single ship. By 1945, Kaiser shipyards built 1,290 ships. One yard broke the world record. A Liberty ship launched in 4 days. They could assemble a ship every 14 hours at peak speed. This was not normal. This was industrial warfare. The U.S. carrier program, the miracle of mass production. The U.S. began building carriers in 3 main categories. 1. Fleet carriers, Essex-class. Fast, powerful, large air wings, the backbone of the Central Pacific Campaign. 2. Light carriers, Independence-class. Converted from cruiser hulls. Quick to produce, ideal for fast carrier groups. 3. Escort carriers, Casablanca-class and Bogue-class. Small, cheap, mass-produced. Used for convoy escort, aircraft transport, and amphibious operations. Japan had nothing comparable. The numbers tell the story. Carrier production. Japan versus the United States. Japan, 1941-1945. Fleet carriers, 6 built. Light carriers, 5. Escort carriers, 6 total. 17 carriers. United States, 1941-1945. 24 Essex-class fleet carriers. 9 Independence-class light carriers. 50 Casablanca-class escort carriers. Plus dozens of Bogue, Sangamon, and Commencement Bay-class carriers. Total, over 100 carriers. This was overwhelming. Japan could not sink ships faster than America could build them. Every time Japan sank a carrier, the United States built 5 more. Every time Japan claimed a victory, America responded with an entire new task force. This was not just a shipbuilding effort. It was a miracle of scale, coordination, and national resolve. A miracle Japan never understood until it was too late. Noted the secret weapon, automation, plus standardization, plus industrial mobilization. What made the American shipbuilding miracle possible was not just money or manpower. It was something deeper. America standardized ship designs. Every Essex-class carrier shared the same hull shape, the same engines, the same elevators, the same flight deck configuration, interchangeable parts, a production method designed for assembly line efficiency. This meant factories could mass-produce components. Workers could be trained quickly. Shipyards could work at maximum speed. Repairs were easier. Spare parts were predictable. Logistics were simplified. This was the same principle that made the U.S. automobile industry so powerful. America did not just build ships, it built them like cars, and it built them faster than any other nation on Earth. The first wave of carriers takes the offensive. By late 1942, the first results of the American miracle began to appear in combat. USS Essex, CV-9, USS Bunker Hill, USS Yorktown, CV-10, USS Intrepid, USS Lexington, CV-16, USS Hornet, CV-12. These new carriers were larger, faster, more durable, with bigger air wings, with better anti-aircraft defenses, with more reliable engines, with stronger radar, with standardized aircraft elevators, with armored protection. Japan expected to face 1 or 2 American carriers at any given battle. By 1944, they faced task forces with 12-16 carriers at once. Japan's pilots were outnumbered. Its carriers were outproduced. Its losses were permanent. America's losses were temporary. This was the beginning of the greatest naval buildup in history, and Japan had no answer. Why Japan could never compete? By early 1943, the Pacific War had shifted from a contest of fleets to a contest of factories, and it was here, far from the islands, the jungles, and the battles, that the outcome of the war was decided. Because the United States possessed something Japan simply did not: industrial depth. Japan could build excellent warships, the Yamato, the Shokaku-class carriers, the Nagato-class battleships, many destroyers and cruisers. but it could not build them in numbers. It had limited steel, limited oil, limited workers, limited fuel, limited electricity, limited shipyard space, limited transport capacity. Japan's entire industrial base was smaller than the state of Pennsylvania. America had dozens of Pennsylvanias. By 1943, Japan was fighting a war of attrition that it had mathematically lost before the first shot was fired at Pearl Harbor. The carrier miracle was not just production, it was a national mobilization unmatched in world history. The U.S. industrial machine comes alive. After Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt issued a challenge. We must build ships faster than the enemy can sink them. America delivered beyond anything the world imagined. Factories operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, across 2 shifts, then 3, with women entering the workforce, with industrial training programs for unskilled workers, with mass production techniques never used in shipbuilding before. This created a fundamental shift. Shipyards stopped being artisanal craft centers. They became assembly lines. Germany and Japan built ships by hand. American shipyards built them by process. The Kansas of the Pacific, the Kaiser Shipyards Revolution. The most astonishing output came from Henry Kaiser's shipyards on the West Coast. Before the war, Kaiser had never built a ship. By 1945, Kaiser's yards built 27% of all U.S. ships, 1,490 ships in total, the fastest construction times in history. His process was revolutionary. Prefabricated ship modules, interchangeable parts, standardized assembly, welding instead of riveting, massive crane systems, round-the-clock teams, female labor force, Rosie the Riveter, production lines for hull sections. The result? A new era of industrial shipbuilding. The Liberty ship SS Robert E. Peary was launched only 4 days and 15 hours after its keel was laid. This speed stunned the world. It stunned Japan even more, because Japan's shipyards needed months to build escort vessels and years to build carriers. America could build escort carriers like mass-market products. The escort carrier explosion, the Casablanca-class. The Casablanca-class escort carriers were one of the most remarkable wartime creations. They were cheap, fast to produce, reliable, small but effective, perfect for convoy escort, ideal for amphibious operations, used as aircraft transports, capable of anti-submarine warfare, produced in staggering numbers. How staggering? 50 Casablanca-class escort carriers built in less than 2 years. Japan built 6 escort carriers in the entire war. Each Casablanca-class ship required 56 days of construction, 900 workers, standardized engines, prefabricated hull sections, production methods adapted from the automobile industry. This meant the U.S. could flood the Pacific with carrier decks. Japan could not. The Essex-class, the production titan of the war. If the Casablanca-class was the mass product, the Essex-class was the premium flagship. These were the carriers that would break the back of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The Essex-class carriers were designed to launch more aircraft than Japanese carriers, survive more damage, operate longer sorties, handle more missions, recover planes more efficiently, integrate radar into operations, carry advanced anti-aircraft weapons. Operate across the entire Pacific production was shocking. 24 Essex-class carriers built between 1942 and 1945. Japan built just 6 large carriers in the same period. Each Essex-class carrier required 8 months to 1 year, 30,000 workers, 20,000 tons of steel, 10 million work hours, a supply chain of hundreds of factories, and America delivered. By the time of the Marianas Campaign in 1944, the U.S. Navy could field carrier groups that Japan could not even imagine. Carrier task groups with 8 to 12 fleet carriers, light carriers in support. dozens of escort carriers, hundreds of aircraft per strike wave, radar coordination, unified command structures, night flying capability, submarines hunting enemy picket ships, destroyers forming anti-air screens, logistics ships refueling carriers at sea. Japan's carrier fleet had no chance. The Independence-class, light carriers built from cruisers. Another brilliant American innovation was the light carrier conversion program. The U.S. took Cleveland-class light cruiser hulls, removed their superstructures, installed flight decks, added hangars and elevators, outfitted them with anti-aircraft guns, and turned them into fast light carriers. Result: 9 Independence-class light carriers built in record time. They could keep up with fleet carriers, provide extra air wings, serve as rapid reinforcements, fill the gaps in major operations. These ships took less than 6 months to complete because the hulls were already partially built. This was American adaptability at its finest. Japan, meanwhile, had to start from scratch. That training the crews, the hidden miracle behind the ships. Building ships was only the beginning. They needed pilots, mechanics, deck crews, armorers, engineers, communications specialists, navigators, radar operators, damage control teams. And these crews required years of training. Japan struggled with this. After losing its elite carrier pilots at Coral Sea, Midway, and Santa Cruz, Japan could not replace them quickly. The U.S. could. Thanks to thousands of training aircraft, hundreds of flight instructors, massive pilot schools, standardized training curriculum, advanced flight simulators, dedicated carrier qualification ships, multiple naval air stations across the country. The U.S. produced 10 times more naval aviators than Japan between 1942 and 1945. Even if Japan had built more carriers, they did not have the pilots to fly from them. America had both. The logistics chain, the Navy behind the Navy. Carrier operations required fuel, ammunition, food, spare parts, aircraft, and people. The U.S. created something no Navy had ever built before: a fleet of logistics ships designed to resupply carriers at sea. This eliminated the need to return to Pearl Harbor or San Diego. Japan's fleet had limited at-sea replenishment capability. The U.S. fleet could fight indefinitely. This meant carriers stayed on station longer. Strike operations became continuous. Japan had no rest. Attrition favored the U.S. even more. Fast carrier groups became unstoppable. By 1944, the U.S. Navy functioned like a floating industrial complex that moved across the ocean at 30 knots. Japan was fighting a machine it was never prepared to face. The final result: America had more carrier decks than Japan had airplanes. By late 1944, U.S. carrier production reached a level that shocked even American commanders. Japan could put maybe 200 to 300 carrier aircraft into a major battle. America could put 1,500, 2,000 aircraft from over a dozen carriers, operating under unified command, with radar coordination, with logistics ships on standby, with experienced pilots, with massive AA protection. This was not a fleet. This was a naval air force, a force Japan could not match under any circumstances. The outcome was inevitable. Operations like the Marianas, the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, Leyte Gulf, Iwo Jima, Okinawa all demonstrated the same truth. Industry wins wars, and America's industrial capacity did what no navy in history could. It drowned the Pacific in ships. The moment America's carriers revealed their true power. By the beginning of 1944, everything the United States had built, every factory, every shipyard, every training program, every prefabricated hull section and engine block, was converging into the most powerful naval force in history. The new American Pacific Fleet was unlike anything the world had seen. It wasn't a fleet in the traditional sense. It was a mobile empire. A floating city of Essex-class fleet carriers, Independence-class light carriers, Casablanca-class escort carriers, fast battleships, cruisers, destroyers, submarines, supply ships, repair depots, ammunition vessels, fuel tankers, medical ships, floating workshops. Japan now faced an enemy whose industrial engine could not be stopped, whose air groups regenerated every month, and whose losses no longer mattered. The U.S. Navy could absorb defeat and return stronger. Japan could not. And this reality became undeniable in the battles of 1944. The new era of naval warfare, the Fast Carrier Task Force. In 1943, the U.S. Navy reorganized its carriers into a formation called the Fast Carrier Task Force, Task Force 58, under Admiral Mitcher. This formation combined fleet carriers, light carriers, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, supply ships into a single integrated high-speed strike force. The concept was revolutionary. Carriers no longer fought individually. They fought as a unified mobile air fortress. A single task force could bring 8-12 carriers, 601,000 aircraft, multiple battleships with new radar-directed AA guns, destroyer screens for torpedo defense, cruiser firepower, submarine pickets, logistics ships replenishing fuel and ammunition while underway. Japan had nothing like this. Their remaining carriers often fought alone or in small groups, with skilled pilots in short supply and without coordinated protection. The Fast Carrier Task Force was the embodiment of America's industrial miracle, and its first major test came in the Central Pacific. The Marianas, when Japan learned the war could not be won. In June 1944, Japan committed what remained of its carrier air arm to the defense of the Marianas. The result became known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. On paper, the Japanese had 9 carriers, 450 carrier aircraft, roughly 200 land-based planes, an experienced corps of naval commanders. But in reality, their pilots were inexperienced, their engines were unreliable, their radar was primitive, their aircraft were outclassed, their carriers were slower, their flight decks were smaller, their logistics were collapsing, their tactics had not evolved, their anti-aircraft fire was weak, their replacements were gone. Against this, the U.S. Navy brought 15 carriers, 902 aircraft, 2,400 AA guns on support ships, superior radar detection, fast battleships, fighter direction officers, excellent pilot training, the rugged F-6F Hellcat, constant aircraft replacements, logistics ships that could refuel the fleet at sea. The outcome was inevitable. Over 600 Japanese aircraft were destroyed in 2 days. Many American pilots compared it to shooting training drones. Japan's carrier air arm, the force that had shocked the world at Pearl Harbor, ceased to exist. It was never again a meaningful threat. This was the turning point. Not because of tactics, not because of luck, not because of weather. Because the United States had built a carrier force that Japan could not replace losses against. The Battle of the Philippine Sea, the death of Japan's carrier aviation. The Battle of the Philippine Sea was more than a strategic defeat. It was an extinction event. Japan lost, 3 carriers sunk, 2 badly damaged, over 90% of its carrier aviators, over 400 carrier aircraft, irreplaceable instructors, veteran maintenance crews, the elite pilots trained for years, the tactical memory of the pre-war Navy. The Imperial Japanese Navy never recovered from this. And the reason was simple. America could build carriers and train pilots faster than Japan could bury its dead. Within months, the U.S. replaced every plane lost. Japan could not replace even a fraction. This was the ultimate demonstration of the industrial balance of power. The U.S. carrier machine moves to the Philippines. After the Marianas, the U.S. Navy did not pause. New carrier groups arrived. New ships joined the fleet. New air wings rotated in. New pilots filled the ranks. New replacement aircraft came weekly. The fleet grew larger, even as it fought daily. Japan's fleet grew smaller the longer it survived. By October 1944, the United States had the strongest naval force ever assembled. Japan, desperate, committed its remaining ships to the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history. Leyte Gulf, when Japan lost everything except desperation. Leyte Gulf was Japan's final attempt to destroy American naval power. It failed. Not because the Japanese were outnumbered, though they were. Not because American weapons were better, though they often were. Not because of luck. But because America's carriers were replaceable. Japan's carriers were not. During the battle, U.S. air groups attacked from multiple directions. Radar-directed fighters intercepted Japanese planes far from target. American pilots had thousands of hours of training. Replacement aircraft were flown from Escort carriers. Damaged ships were repaired in days at floating bases. Fuel and ammunition flowed steadily from logistics ships. The U.S. fleet could sustain 24-hour combat. Japan had none of this. Their fleet was operating with limited fuel, with inexperienced pilots, with undertrained deck crews, with poor coordination, with obsolete aircraft, with little carrier integration, with no ability to replace losses. The result? Japan lost 4 carriers in a single day. The last large Japanese carrier, Zuikaku, sank with most of her crew. Their naval aviation ceased to exist. It was the final death of the force that had once dominated the Pacific. The final stage, when America had too many carriers to count. In 1945, as U.S. forces approached Iwo Jima and Okinawa, Japan faced an enemy whose scale was beyond comprehension. A typical American operation involved 15-20 carriers, over 1,500 carrier aircraft, escort carriers for close air support, light carriers for rapid strikes, scarce Japanese air defenses, hundreds of radar picket ships, thousands of AA guns, submarine screens, cruiser and destroyer escorts, logistics ships refueling the fleet non-stop Japan could only respond with, kamikaze attacks, dwindling numbers of aircraft, damaged airfields, inexperienced teenage pilots, little radar coordination, no reserves, no ability to repair major ships, no new carriers under construction. The war was no longer competitive. It was mechanical, industrial, inevitable. Because once the United States reached full production, Japan ceased to have any chance whatsoever to fight as a naval power. The carrier miracle had reshaped the Pacific, and it was about to deliver the final blow. The point of no return. By early 1945, Japan was no longer fighting to win. It was fighting to delay defeat by days, maybe weeks. The Imperial Japanese Navy, the same force that had stunned the world at Pearl Harbor, that had swept across the Pacific in 1941-1942, was now a shadow of itself. Its aircraft carriers were gone. Its pilots were gone. Its fuel reserves were almost gone. Its shipyards lay in ruins. Its airfields were craters. Its training system had collapsed. Its factories were starving for steel and electricity. Its merchant fleet had been sunk by American submarines. Its war economy had ceased to function. And above all, Japan could not replace a single major warship. Meanwhile, the United States had so many aircraft carriers that some spent months anchored at Ulithi simply because there were not enough missions to use them all. Japan's problem was not bravery or skill. Its problem was mathematics. When the numbers became this lopsided, when one side built ships faster than the other side could build airplanes, the war became one-sided, and this imbalance reached its peak at Okinawa. Okinawa, the final test of America's industrial empire. The Battle of Okinawa was the bloodiest amphibious operation of the entire Pacific War. But for the U.S. Navy, it was also the most demanding carrier operation ever conducted in warfare. At Okinawa, the U.S. deployed 18 fleet carriers, 15 light carriers, over 160 destroyers and destroyer escorts, 40 escort carriers, thousands of aircraft, massive amphibious assault forces, a logistics fleet larger than Japan's entire navy. This force consumed 6 million gallons of fuel per day, tens of thousands of bombs, hundreds of thousands of gallons of aviation gasoline. Replacement aircraft from escort carriers. Constant resupply from floating bases. Japan responded with the largest kamikaze offensive in history. Over 1,900 kamikaze aircraft were launched between April and June 1945. They damaged and sank ships. They inflicted heavy casualties. They revealed the desperation of Japan's final months. But they could not stop the American carrier armada, because every damaged carrier was repaired, every lost aircraft was replaced, every fallen pilot was replaced, every destroyed radar was rebuilt, every wounded destroyer was patched and sent back, every loss was temporary. This was the difference between an industrial power and a nation collapsing from exhaustion. The industry behind the industry. Why America never ran out of anything. What made the U.S. carrier miracle possible was not just shipyards. It was the entire industrial ecosystem behind them. To sustain a fleet of 100-plus carriers and hundreds of support ships, the United States built thousands of aircraft factories, steel plants, aluminum smelters, oil refineries, rubber plants, radar production lines, machine tool factories, synthetic materials, production, mass pilot training schools, Navy supply depots, fuel shipping networks, floating dry docks, mobile repair ships, mobile hospitals, logistics squadrons, ammunition depots, assembly line shipyards, trans-Pacific supply routes. This ecosystem meant one thing: the U.S. Navy could fight forever. Japan's Navy could fight for only as long as its last reserves lasted. Once the reserves were gone, there was nothing left. The Japanese perspective. When admirals realized the war was lost. Japanese admirals understood the truth long before the government admitted it. After the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Admiral Ozawa said, "We no longer have the ability to conduct carrier warfare." He was right. After Leyte Gulf, Admiral Toyota reported, "Our Navy has ceased to exist as a fighting force." He was right. After the loss of Okinawa, Admiral Yonai admitted, "There is no means left to resist the American fleet." He was right. Japan had lost the war not in 1945, not at Okinawa, not at Iwo Jima, not at Leyte Gulf. Japan lost the war in 1942 when it chose to attack a nation whose industrial capacity it did not understand. But the industrial lesson of history. The defeat of Japan is often attributed to Pearl Harbor wake-up call, Midway, submarine warfare, island hopping strategy, American pilots, radar superiority, intelligence breakthroughs, leadership under Nimitz and Halsey. All of these mattered, but the ultimate truth is deeper. Japan lost because it fought a nation that could replace everything faster than Japan could destroy anything. At its peak, the U.S. produced 1 aircraft carrier every month, 5 escort carriers every month, 2 battleships every 6 months, dozens of destroyers monthly, thousands of aircraft monthly, millions of shells and bullets daily, a new fleet of submarines every quarter, more merchant shipping in 1 year than Japan had at the start of the war. Japan could not match any of it. The numbers that decided the war Japan built: 17 carriers, all types, during the war, 26 submarines per year, 10,000 aircraft per year, a few destroyers a month, almost no merchant shipping after 1943. The U.S. built 122 carriers, 203 submarines, over 300,000 aircraft, 1,200 destroyers and destroyer escorts, 5,000 merchant ships, hundreds of new landing ships, an armada of support vessels. There has never been a mismatch like this in naval history. The final truth: America did not just win the carrier war. It reinvented naval power forever. By 1945, the United States Navy was not just the largest in the world, it was larger than every other navy on Earth, combined. When the USS Missouri entered Tokyo Bay to accept Japan's surrender, she was escorted by a fleet of carriers, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, submarines, logistics ships, hospital ships, transports. A navy so enormous, so overwhelming, that no nation had ever seen anything like it. Japan surrendered not only because of the atomic bombs, not only because of the island battles, but because the U.S. Navy made Japan's position hopeless long before Hiroshima. The carrier miracle decided the war by making Japan's strategy impossible. The final message: America did not merely outfight Japan. It outbuilt it, it outproduced it, it outmaneuvered it, it outlasted it. It reshaped naval warfare in the process. The U.S. Carrier miracle is the story of what happens when a nation mobilizes its factories, workers, engineers, and industry to rebuild a navy faster than the enemy can destroy it. It is the story of how America created the most powerful naval force in history, and how Japan learned far too late that industrial power decides wars before the battles even begin.